Let's see if we're live. We should be live. Hi, guys. I hope you can hear me. Maybe you can write on the chat. Oh, sorry, this doesn't start well. I have my iPad. I have my phone. The last time it was difficult to deal with the chat, so I'm making sure that right now I get everything figured out. So let's see. Let me see if you should be able to hear me and see me. So welcome back. This is live Q&A number 2. During the first one, I had a blast, so I want to do it again. You asked a lot of interesting questions. And we have 1 hour 30, maybe 1 hour 45 if things get really interesting. And I haven't covered, I'm going to try to cover as much ground as possible because you have so many interesting questions. I have printed some of the questions that you asked me in the previous days, so I'm going to go through some of them, but also I'm going to try to reply to all the questions that you're asking me on the chat, starting from the top. So just one more thing I wanted to say. If I don't reply to all questions, it's not because I'm ignoring people, it's just because I have to select some questions, and some of you have asked me very long questions that it's going to be a little bit complicated to read all of the entire text. So if you can just ask, short questions and to the point. So without further ado, let's get started. I'll start replying some of the questions that you asked me in the chat before this video started. And Michael Greben, I think, he said, I'm sorry for butchering your names again. You said Japanese is your weakest language. What level are you at? Is it at least B1? One thing that I always tell my students and people I meet, and also on YouTube in general, is that I think that B1, A1, C1, they're just labels. I think that a more proper question that you should ask yourself in general, you can ask someone, but you should first and foremost ask yourself is, where do I stand? What am I able to do with this language? As far as I'm concerned, for Japanese, I do not know. It could be A2, it could be B1, most probably B1, but I think that more than a label, again, I can tell you what I'm able to do with Japanese. This is what I do at the beginning of every year when I craft a plan. I'm going to talk about it in one of the next videos. I ask myself, where do I stand? What am I able to do in terms of reading, listening, writing, and speaking? And I think it's a much more appropriate question. I always divide into these 4 main areas. So Michael, the answer is I'm not really sure. It's really rusty. I haven't so much as touched it in a long time, but I plan on going back to it probably in a year because now I'm focusing on other languages. But I would say it's pretty rusty. I can maybe have a conversation with people in general. I can read simple texts, but really it's rusty. And the bottom line is I gotta go back to it because it's a beautiful language, and I would like to go visit Japan sooner than later when this pandemic is over. Michael, how many languages do you want to speak in total? That's the same person. Is there a number where you want to stop adding new languages and start improving the ones you already speak? I always say that a polyglot, this label, they are able to learn more languages more easily because they have a lot of languages under their belt, so to speak, but it's more difficult to maintain all the languages. So in my case, I don't know how many languages I want to be speaking in my life. To me, numbers are useless. To me, it's much more relevant actually to be able to use the languages that I learn in a meaningful way. So if I can use 4 languages in a meaningful way, meaning traveling to the country, being friends with natives, and living experiences of 4 languages is much better than just having, say, 10 or 15, knowing 10 or 15 languages and not using them. So for me, I do not know how many languages I want to speak in total. It doesn't really matter. I will figure it out on my way, my existential path. There's no fixed number, again, 20, 30. I will see. I don't think I'll ever stop learning in general. This is my mantra, is keep learning for the rest of your life. Saretta, she says, sono in Germania da 1 anno, per lavoro parlo solo inglese, anche se studio tedesco con costanza, parlare è un incubo. Capisco, leggo e scrivo benino, ma quando apro bocca sono nella nebbia. She's basically saying, I've been living a journey for 1 year. I have been just speaking English, and even if I've been learning German every day. Speaking is really tough. I read and write decently, but when I open my mouth, I am at a loss. Do you have any advice? Well, my advice is to get a tutor, and you can find them on YouTube. I'm sorry, YouTube. You can find them on the internet. It's quite easy. You have platforms like italki, for example, or Preply or Verbling. And then what I always say is that the most important thing is to find a tutor you like working with, a person who is really nice and flexible. That's single-handedly the most important thing. It doesn't matter how competent they are. The most important thing, and that they're nice people and they're flexible in terms of when you ask them, hey, I would like this lesson to be this way, and are you available at this time? Well, these are much more important than their capacity of explaining in depth grammar notes or grammar, the nitty-gritty details of a grammar of a language. And it might sound weird because Sareta says that she's been living in Germany for 1 year, but it doesn't matter. The problem is that when you live in country, a lot of people do not have the patience to correct you, or even when you go and interact with people in shops, then the problem is that these are very short conversations, and it's difficult, it's stressful. So to me, Sara or Sarita, I would the advice would be, my piece of advice is to find a tutor and just connect with this tutor and build a relationship, a friendship with this tutor, and start speaking the language in a protected environment. Then slowly you can start interacting more and more with people. This is quite important, and a lot of people have a hard time speaking a foreign language because stress is involved. You're a little bit uncertain about what to say, when to say it, and you feel a little bit judged. This happens to everyone, but you have to speak. And I would say grab a tutor, not literally, and start speaking. Start interacting with them. So, gracias desde Colombia, amigo Luca. Gracias a ti, Mauricio. How can one remember how to speak in the past tense using sono or ho? I'm not sure. I understand this question. Anderson Polyglot, how to keep fluency level in different languages is to build a lifestyle. So in my case, I've built a lifestyle that allows me to practice a number of languages. I use on a weekly basis, I speak between, let's say, 7 and 9 languages. Not every day, of course, but I'm saying on a weekly basis because I am a language coach. So I teach people, I train or coach people in different combinations. For example, yesterday I had a class. I was coaching a Russian person learning German, and we were speaking German, so I was giving all the explanations in German. Sometimes, I train in Italian, Spanish. People want to learn, for example, English, or do the opposite. So in my work, I tend to use a number of languages. Then I have a team I communicate with in Italian, English, Spanish, and other languages. So if you want to maintain languages, you have to create a lifestyle. On top of all this, apart from the fact that language learning is my job hinges on language learning. I also have a lot of friends from all over the world, and I tend to spend time with them either online or offline before the pandemic. Now we'll go back to the old trend, hopefully, when this pandemic is over. But it's a lifestyle. It's a holistic approach to language learning. I do not learn languages in a vacuum. I don't learn languages just to say that I know a bunch of languages. To me, language learning is something that has profoundly changed my life and can change yours. I use languages all the time. That's what makes a difference. So if you want to, maintain languages, you have to create an environment in the right circumstances for you. Otherwise, it's going to be quite difficult to maintain languages, because unfortunately, maintaining languages is something that requires a lot of time and energy, and you want to, build things build the right circumstances. Marco Filippi says, since you don't use Anki, what type of SRS, space-time repetition, do you use for vocabulary? That's a big one, but basically, to make a long story short, I use notebooks, short notebooks, and in general, what I do is I use my bidirectional translation method, where this method has the entire space repetition system integrated in the method itself. So now it might take a little bit, might take a lot to explain how the method works in detail, but to, again, for the sake of brevity and simplicity, this, I make sure that I repeat things in a smart way. And I use notebooks. When it comes to repetition in general, when I've hit, for example, say the intermediate level, B1, I tend to work on my target language during the week by exposing myself to the target language, watching videos, listening to podcasts with transcripts, etc. And then I make sure that at the end of the week, I just basically transfer all the information into my notebook or notebooks, and I have a notebook for each different language. And then I have created a habit of reviewing them, having a review system that is really kind of special and works really well for me. Now, I can't go into the details here, but just for the sake of brevity and simplicity, writing things down, especially fragments, not just single words that are relevant and useful for you, that can reuse and review them regularly, a couple of minutes a day, is really making a difference in my in my retention, vocabulary retention, across a wide range of languages. I do this more often than not with languages I'm actively learning. Of course, not the languages that I have in maintenance mode, quote unquote. So, John, how important is repetition? Is it better to read 1,000 sentences once or one sentence 1,000 times? If the answer is somewhere in between, how do you find the right balance? I said before, it's yes, as I was telling Marco. I think the balance is in between. You have to find a way to repeat words. So if you see a word just once, your brain is not going to remember it. So you have to make sure that somehow you find a way to repeat, to get exposed to the same word or vocabulary, but you have to make sure that you do it in a smart way. Repeating in a dull way over and over is not a very good way to learn things. There is a great book which is called The Truth About How We Learn by Benedict Carey. It should be somewhere up here. Now, I don't remember where it is right now, but maybe Kevin, by the way, Kevin and Berta, they're my team members, and they're in the chat as moderators. They will write all the links of the resources I'm going to quote. And this book, The Truth About How We Learn by Benedict Carey, is a fantastic book that talks about how to repeat the smart way. It's not just about language learning. Actually, they do not talk about language learning. They talk about how college students can learn in the United States and across the world, can learn better. So these are precious pieces of advice that you can actually leverage and harness yourself to learn anything. And basically, the bottom line is you have to find a system where you repeat the information, but you reuse it first. So when you want to repeat words, always grab small fragments of speech that are interesting for you, and then at specific moments of time, you have to make sure that you reuse them in a smart way. Either you talk to yourself, or you make sure that you reuse them in some conversation that you can have with, for example, that you plan on having with your tutor. Branislav, I think. Hi, Luca, I have a question. I'm currently learning 4 languages: English, Italian, Latin, and Mandarin. Any advice on how to organize? The thing I would say is that learning 4 languages at the same time is quite the feat, so to speak, is quite the challenge. If I were you, if you really want to pursue 4 languages at the same time, my piece of advice would be to find maybe 10 minutes or 20 minutes to cover each language every day, because unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I believe that if you want to learn a language well, you have to learn it every day. If you do not learn a language every day, then you're sending your brain the wrong signal or the wrong signals. Your brain gets confused. When you've learned your own native language, you've been speaking and using that language every single day. But if you say, let's grab Mandarin, right? If you learn it every 3 days, which is something that a lot of people do, they rotate. They say, oh, I have 2 languages, so I do one on, let's say, I don't know, Latin and Mandarin. I do Latin on Monday and Mandarin on Tuesday, and Latin on Wednesday and Mandarin on Thursday, etc. It confuses your brain. So when it comes to learning a language, you should learn every single day. The problem is if you have 4 languages, you should learn 4 languages every single day. And the more languages you have, the more difficult it is to do that every single day. I'm learning Hungarian, Danish, and Greek at the same time every single day is difficult. To do it every single day is difficult. So my piece of advice would be get organized. Maybe if you are fresh in the morning and you dedicate at least 15 minutes to each language for 1 hour a day, it's much better than, in my book, to rotate. This is what I would say. Plan beforehand and decide that for at least 1 hour a day, you do 15 minutes of each language. Let me scroll down. You have a hint, I think it's a Georgian name, so I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but you asked, whoever you are. Hi, Luca, when should we start practicing to view videos in your target language without looking at the subtitles? I always say you can always watch it with subtitles. Some people come to me and say, hey, should I watch it without subtitles? But if I watch it with subtitles, isn't it cheating? It's not cheating. I always watch even movies in English with subtitles because there's always the possibility of not understanding something because someone speaks with a weird accent. There's some background noise. So I think that subtitles make any video comprehensible. And if you are bothered by subtitles, that's a different matter. But I think that if you keep watching stuff with subtitles, there's no harm in it. Let me see here. What's the time in your country, everyone? Okay, this is not a question about language learning. Hi, Luca. I'm just scrolling down from the beginning because the other time when I was scrolling down to the bottom, it was getting very confusing. So I'm reading one because it was, messing up the chat for me. So to read all your questions, almost, I'm skipping some questions. So sorry, guys, if I skip some questions. It's just to make this, more modular, so to speak. So I'm still learning. Привет z Ukrainy. Hi, привет, Oleg. So let me see. Like English with Lucy. I met Lucy. I don't know if you guys know Lucy. She's a wonderful girl. I met her in Berlin when we met all the YouTubers. We met a couple of years ago. That was organized by my friend Gabriel. And she's a fantastic girl. She gave a great speech about her experience on YouTube. FIFA Macedo Melo. I think you're probably from Brazil. I think I've seen you before. Do you think, I see you online. Do you think taking a language proficiency exam is beneficial to the student in terms of helping him or her improving their knowledge in the target language? Absolutely. But again, and this goes back to the book I was quoting before, is it's really important to use it as a learning tool. We tend to interpret these things as almost a punishment, right? Oh, they're going to give me I'm just going to run a test and they're going to give me, I'm going to get a good or bad mark. Never think in terms of performance, always think in terms of learning. If you do this mental shift, if you start thinking that every single experience you go through is a learning experience, everything changes. So say if you sit an exam and then you get a bad mark and then you go back home despondent and you think, oh, I've done so poorly at this exam, I flunked the exam. I don't think it's a good way of seeing things. And if you go back and say, oh, I've learned a bunch of things. I don't know if it ever happened to you guys, if you sit an exam, you flunk, but then you go back and you look at the solutions, if you, for example, mathematics, physics, but also history, whatever. And then you realize that by doing a test, you learn a bunch. So if you learn to use tests in order to learn as learning tools, then everything changes. I have here, I hope you can see it. I have, this is Sprechen, Schreiben, Mitreden. This was C2, so that's C2 of Goethe Institute that I did. It was, I think, 10 years ago. There was something like that. Then I have all these I hope you can see it. I bought all these that I use with my students. So a lot of my students have, they actually done these exams in Spanish, German. I have a few more here. Actually, I think I have I don't know, a lot. So I have, this is still Goethe Institute. Then you have Dele2. So these are all resources I'm using with my students. I'm training them to basically use these books in a new way. right? It's not just the book in and of itself, but always how you use it. It really makes a difference. So Melo, I think that's your name, because the rest is difficult to pronounce. FIFA Macedo Melo. They're amazing tools if you know how to do them, and I always recommend that you actually, that you do these exams if you can, because you can really learn a bunch from them. I myself, I have two. I've done 4 exams, so English, French, Spanish, and German, and I want to sit the Polish exam, C1, and I want to do that in Warszawa. When in Warsaw, or Wawa, as some people call it, in Poland, at the end of the year. And I talked about it with my instructor, my Polish instructor. She's also a good friend of mine, Gosia. Gosia, hi, if you're watching this. We talked just 1 hour before this, it's great. I'm excited because I'm using this exam as an excuse to get Polish, to the next level, so to speak. So let me scroll up, because guys, I've seen here there's so many questions, and now I got lost. So I'm just scrolling up to a point. Otherwise, this is going to be complicated. Joaco, ¿cuándo decides empezar a ver películas y ¿cuándo decides empezar a ver películas y series sin subtítulos? Porque me encuentro a un nivel avanzado, pero siento que me acostumbré mucho a los subtítulos. So he's asking, when do you start, decide to watch movies and TV series without subtitles? I think I replied before, Joaco, or Joaco, that I watch stuff with subtitles. So always with subtitles, no matter the language, no matter the level, because I always think that it's beneficial to watch something with subtitles. It's comprehensible input. Languages with Curro. Which first advice would you give to a beginner polyglot or person who wants to learn more languages? Gracias, saludos desde Andalucía. Beautiful Andalucía. Been there some time ago. I think 12 years ago. Just amazing. My advice should be to pursue a life of learning, and believe and have the strong belief that languages can change your life, but they should not just be stuff that you accumulate. You should avoid the hoarder syndrome. In other words, thinking, oh, when can I be called a polyglot? With 3, 4, 5 languages? Doesn't matter. It's much more important to learn one language well, use it, live experiences, getting to know interesting people, and move on to the next one. So my piece of advice for a beginner polyglot, or person who wants to learn a bunch of languages, that do not get obsessed by languages, and see languages as tools that can change your life and can change the vision that you have towards the world, not things that you accumulate. This is the reason why I'm giving you this piece of advice, is because I've seen a lot of people, I call them hoarders, right? They've been bitten by the polyglot bug, so to speak, but not the good bug. Are you thinking of learning Arabic? Yes, I have it here. So I already have, I think the camera has to adjust. I already have l'arabo senza sforzo. I don't think it's going to be senza sforzo, that is without effort. But yeah, I want to learn Arabic. I don't know exactly when this is going to happen, but I already bought the book, and when I buy the book, normally it's going to happen. So David Solis. Hi, Luca. My first goal is to read literature in my target language, but I get terrified in front of the books, even having a good amount of vocabulary. Could you give me a piece of advice? So I'm not sure whether you get terrified by books because I guess you get intimidated by the idea of reading them, right? Because you get, one thing that happened to me is that when I learn a language for some time, then I get slightly intimidated or slightly anxious about the idea of reading a book and getting disappointed for not understanding. This is very common. My piece of advice would be start with books that are easier. So yes, sure, you want to read masterpieces written in your target language. Let's suppose that you're learning, say, Russian, just to give an example, or German, French, beautiful literature. But I would not start reading these gigantic books if you have, say, a B1, because reading books is a complex skill, and you have to have a lot of vocabulary and vocab, and there's a high chance that you're going to be at a loss with books that are really complicated. I will always take it one step at a time. I would get a Kindle, for example, that even if I tend to use to read on paper, the Kindle has the advantage that you can look for words. You can just push on the word itself. You see the word and then it gives you directly the meaning. So it makes it easier to look for words. And the other thing is that I would go back and start reading books that you have already read and that are relatively short. That simplifies the reading, because once you understand the content of a book you already read it, it's much easier to read it in a foreign language. Or you can use graded readers. Maybe I can find it here. I have a graded reader in Chinese, just to give an idea how cool it is. But now, yeah, I can see it here. So, for example, these are very cool. I don't know if you can see. This is a graded reader in Chinese. The thing about, see, it always says, it also has, you know, this cool stuff. This is special for Chinese, right? Because you can, for example, the Chinese. Let me just show you the page here. So you should be able to see it, hopefully, and you can use this to cover the pinyin, so to cover the transliteration. But the bottom line of this is these are called graded readers. So this is called graded Chinese, right? Graded reader, Chinese reader, number 2, and then you have number 3. This is called selected abridged Chinese contemporary short stories, and it's great. This stuff is great. They're producing more and more graded readers. I would not recommend you read stories for children unless you like them, but they happen to be more complex than you can imagine. So there's a very common piece of advice, or maybe stereotype, that read stories for children, unless it's really simplified language. It's been simplified. A lot of books that are famous for being great books for children, etc. The Little Prince is an example. They're not as easy as they look. So starting with books that that you maybe already read in your own native language or graded readers is much better. And don't worry, everybody's intimidated by big books, but don't start with big books. Otherwise, it's gonna get tough. I did that. I learned my hard lesson when I did I started reading it. And I still have it. It's the original version is, I think, it's back here because we have 2 lines of books. And I was painstakingly jotting, looking for every word, but I will not redo it now. So let me see here. Trevor Alfred, do you sample languages before committing to fully learning them? What are signs for you that you want to keep a language in your life? The signs come from my life. So it's a very interesting question, Trevor. I don't really sample languages, meaning that when I toy with the idea of learning a language, normally then I go for it. I don't dabble with languages. I don't like, even if I understand that there's some merit in just going around and saying, you go to a country and say hi in the local language, and then you get a smile. Beautiful. I've done that before, but it's really not satisfying for me. When I speak a language, when sounds get out of my mouth, I want to speak that language. So, I've been toying with the idea of learning Serbian, and now I decided to learn Serbian. And what I normally do is I jot down the date. It's normally in September, so Serbian is going to happen in September. And then I go for it. So the signs normally appear later. Well, they appear before because, maybe I went to, for example, the Balkans. I was in Belgrade. I really like Serbian culture, etc. But then once you start learning the language, it's like things start happening, or better, I start seeing things that were there before, but I didn't see them. So it's this amazing feeling when you start speaking a language and then you realize, those people are actually from Turkey. Now I imagine that I decide to learn Turkish. Before, you don't even notice, but then that reinforces the strength of your decision. So it's both before and later, but I sample languages for a very brief period of time. And then if I decide to go for it, then that's it. And then it's for life. I see languages like friends. For me, when I make friends with someone, it's for life. Well, real friendship, of course. So, Jens Brian, what is your opinion about the education system in high school? Don't get me started about this. I'm kidding. I have here, I jotted down another question, which is I wanted to read because it's very similar to yours. And let's see if I can find it. Yes, so it's by Poliglotta Africano. And he said, Poliglotta Africano, hi, if you're there. I asked a question last time, but you didn't respond. Sorry about that. But as I told you, I sometimes I skip questions because you guys are so great and you ask so many questions. I asked a question last time, you didn't respond. How do you implement the methods used by polyglots in school so that learners don't get bored and they also benefit? So I do not think very high of the education system across the world, but I don't know if you ever heard of, I think I talked about this in the last Q&A. Finland is a very peculiar case of how you can turn a relatively inefficient system into a fantastic system. And if you go on YouTube, you're already on YouTube anyway, by the way, and there's a documentary by Michael Moore that talks about that. He goes to Finland and he asks the Finns directly, what is it that you're doing right? And then there's a whole story behind it. So I think that in general, we have a system that is based on knowledge more than skill. It's not skill building, it's more knowledge building. So wherever you are in the world, I'm pretty sure that, if you've gone to school, in high school, you've figured out that most of the time they do not teach us how to learn. We don't know how to learn. When I hit university, I didn't know how to solve problems. They had given us for example, for mathematics, they had given us a lot of equations and then just told us just apply the equation and that's it. It's a very inefficient way of teaching anything. And this has been my experience, and that has been the experience of a lot of students that I have the pleasure of coaching, and a lot of people I have the pleasure of talking to about the education system. And this is particularly jarring when it comes to language learning. So language learning is a glaring example of the fact that after 5 years of high school or college, for that matter, people cannot string sentences together. They might know a lot of words, but they actually cannot speak the language. And this is because you build skills by doing stuff. And I get the impression, with a few great exceptions, that people tend to speak about languages rather than speak the languages themselves at school. That's the main difference. So if I had to implement, I would do a bunch of things. I've given this speech in Scotland about how to change the entire education system, and I have I think maybe Ken can write a link. That we have a link on the. We have an article on the blog talking about what I would do to change the language system, the education in general, implementing more things. How, for example, meditation, how to use the internet, emotional intelligence, and obviously language learning. And then when it comes to language learning, what I would do, a typical, let's say, normal week for me would be to watch with my students, would be to watch 1 or 2 videos films, to movies, with subtitles, to have discussions, to have them, work in groups, to solve language problems, to have them play games, speaking languages, and to speak languages first and foremost. And then I would definitely teach them grammar in an indirect way. I've laid out some details there. This is very long to explain, and this is the philosophy by which I abide. And with a little bit more effort and a little bit of reflection, everybody could learn a language very well at school. It's just that the system is a little bit old. It dates back to the Industrial Revolution. It has never changed. And it's a big elephant that is difficult to change for a number of reasons that range from political reasons, economic reasons, etc. So some people haven't figured out that we live in an era where the internet has pretty much changed everything, and we cannot keep going for a long period of time. This is not sustainable. Sooner or later, the system is going to crash in a way, and this is already happening when it comes to higher education, university, etc. Because the internet has really changed the way we think and we conceive information, how we consume information, and how we can, actually take things to the next level. Language learning is no exception in that regard. So, Claudia Longhifarina asks me, quali autori italiani preferisci? I know it might sound like which authors do you prefer? Which Italian authors do you prefer? Italo Calvino, I think, is just an amazing writer. He's my favorite writer. Italo Calvino. Umberto Eco is also a great guy. Carlo Rovelli. I don't know if you ever heard Carlo Rovelli. He talks about physics, but I really like the way he writes. But these two, on top of everybody else, Italo Calvino and Umberto Eco. Even if Umberto Eco might be a little bit verbose at times, but Italo Calvino, Il Barone Rampante is one of my favorite books. And it's one of those books that really changed the way I see things when I was a little kid. I read it, and it's one of those rare books that when I reread it, I had the same beautiful feelings. And I don't know about you guys, but I love reading, and I read all the time. Whenever I can, especially at night. I'm almost like a kid at night when I started going back to reading Italo Calvino's books. Thanks for the question. I always love talking about about reading and books. Hussein, how can you make balance between new words and keep practice? Well, you just jot down all the new words that you, especially in fragments, that you want to use, and you find interesting ways to use them in a conversation with your tutor or for the people you can talk to. This is what I would do. So you kill two birds with a stone. You have the best. You get the best of both worlds, as they say. Anya, Luca, will you make a video about your library? Yes, my bookshelf. I will definitely make a video in 2021. And I just have to figure out the best way to do it, because there's so many books, and I want to, depending on, we will send you a few questions about what do you want to see in this library, because there's a lot of stuff. So if you're really interested in language learning, there's a specific place where I have all the books about language learning, but I have also books about pretty much everything, because I like everything, especially cosmology, physics, mathematics, quantum mechanics, geopolitics. So it depends on what you want to see. Robinson Parrado, you still have in mind uploading a video speaking about practice speaking with yourself. So yeah, I think I will do that as well. It might be an interesting video. Alejandro Garcia, where we could find more information about bidirectional translation system. I have, I think maybe Kevin can drop there's a YouTube, you can put a link, Kevin. There's a YouTube video that talks about that. Bidirectional translation, that's a speech I gave in Thessaloniki in Greece, and in 2016. And there's also a couple of, if you write the bidirectional translation system Luca Lampariello on Google, you will find also some other interesting articles. I give normally, for people who really you're serious about the bidirectional translation, that is the method that I use to start learning any language. I've just finished a week ago a live group, and for those who want to sign up to the mailing list, we have more surprises this year. So I just ran the second batch with 20 students, and this is going to get bigger. Probably we're going to open it to 100 people, where you can get to know an entire community and you can learn the bidirectional translation, so many techniques. I'm super happy because we have just finished the second one and everybody was enthusiastic about it. But that's, a higher level. There's more details, and it's not for free. But having said that, you'll have a lot of free information you can find on my blog, and also you can find it on the internet, because I give interviews talking about the method, and you can watch a 1 or 2 hour video that where I talk about that during the Polyglot conference that took place in Thessaloniki. Do you still study English systematically, or do you just expose yourself to it, Michael? I think this is your third question. You're a very inquisitive guy. I like that. I do not learn English systematically anymore. I just use it, but I never forget that first, English is a foreign language for me, and second, I will never stop learning. While we're talking, there are more words getting into the so-called pool of words and vocabulary within the English language. So you'll never. A language is an entity that is a living entity that changes in time and space. So you will never really catch it. But I pursue a life of learning. So for me, the most important thing is the act of learning itself. I do not study English systematically, but I use it all the time. And whenever I stumble upon, expressions that I don't know, I jot them down because I want to know them. And this even if my learning curve has considerably slowed down, I'm always very appreciative of all the feedback that you guys give me when I make a mistake on YouTube, or when I make, I don't know, mispronounced words. That's gold. I found all these, pieces of feedback very helpful to keep refining my skills. So let me see. Luca has a lot of questions to answer. He will try to get as many as possible. Kevin says, yes, I will try to do that. Isailo Domdic, hola Luca, ¿todavía quieres aprender serbio? Si quieres, estoy listo para ayudarte. Saludos. Thank you, Isailo. Yes, I want to learn Serbian starting starting in September. I already have my friend Branka. Hi, Branka. I'm pretty sure you're watching this because you told me you would watch it. And I will most probably work with her at the beginning, but any help is much appreciated. So Jens, what is your opinion about the education system? Already answered this question. Lara Megetto, I hope I didn't butcher your name. Do you work as an interpreter? If you do, how do you find this job? I've never worked as an interpreter. I have actually worked as an interpreter, but unofficially. I went to a conference interpreting school in Paris for 1 year, but then I decided that that was not the path for me. It's a wonderful, it's an intriguing job. It's very demanding. And if you want to go for it, and if you feel like you have this, you like interpreting, it's fantastic, but it's really demanding. And one of the things that one of our teachers, I think it was the Italian teacher there, because I was doing Italian. Italian was my native language, and my working languages were English, French, and German. I think the Italian teacher said, if you want to be an interpreter, you have to focus on 3 languages. You have to give most of your time and energy to these 3 languages, because you have to constantly get updated about everything. You have to read newspapers, understand the nitty-gritty details of pretty much cultural things, and it's really demanding. And I remember once my teacher got upset because she had seen that I was learning Japanese, and she said, "What are you doing with that book?" And I said, "Well, I'm learning Japanese." She said, "Yeah, but you're in a very difficult elite interpreting school, so you have to focus on just 3 languages." And I couldn't help thinking that was not, I don't want to give up on stuff, of course, there's the saying, jack of all trades, masters of none. And that's true. But I just figured out with time that I didn't want to be an interpreter. But if you want to go for it, you should definitely give it a try. Remember that it's tough. There's a lot of competition. It's very demanding, and you need some unique skills. You have to develop some unique skills, but it's definitely worth it. So, Tito Cruz Davila, a estas alturas de tu vida, ¿que te sientes el políglota de entender a muchos países e idiomas? Saludo desde México. I feel great. He's asking, how do you feel about understanding so many countries and languages? I feel great, and I feel that it has definitely changed my life. It's not about, I'm very glad about the fact that I started this YouTube channel, because I think that getting out there creates serendipity in your life. It allows you, I've met so many people thanks to YouTube. You guys are great. You and all the people along the path that have helped me. So it's great that language learning has brought a lot of things in my life, but I think that the most important thing is that it has brought about a major shift in the way I see the world. So I see the world in brighter colors, so to speak. I really can't put words, I can't really explain how to describe this, but it's just, the movie The Matrix, right? All of a sudden, Neo sees the world as it is, reality as it is, not as people perceive it. Now, I'm not comparing myself with Neo, but in a way, I see beyond, a monolingual person doesn't get the things that I get at a party. Just to give an example, I understand all the cultural nuances. If they speak languages that I know, the misunderstandings, it's just mind-blowing. And also, it brings about a different way you see your life. So I always say that it's always worth learning even one language, and even poorly, because language learning is a life-changing thing. So Jesus Suarez, Luca, I really need you to tell everybody how to profit from languages by becoming translators and interpreters. Have you got a piece of advice about it for us? I would just say if you want to be a translator and interpreter, so be it. First, you have to like it, and both translators and good translators and interpreters make money. But most of all, you have to always remember to do the things you love. Steve Jobs said it at Harvard, right? That Harvard speech, he said, your job is going to be a big chunk of your life. So you better love what you do, and you better do what you love. That's the most important thing you have to keep in mind. So I would say the most important thing is that first you have to like it. And if you become a good translator and or interpreter, very different jobs, then that's fantastic for you. Real 05 or Real 05. I don't know. How do you work on your accents? What would you do if you really want to get to native-like accent? Whew, that's a long one. That's a big one. It's complicated to answer this question in just a few words, but I would say that the most important thing when it comes to acquiring good pronunciation is always start from the get-go, start from the very beginning, be interested and learn to notice things. And do not be obsessed. Fourth, do not be obsessed about speaking like a native. You will never exactly speak like a native because accent is tied to your identity. And if you were not born in that country, you will not be a local. But you can start again, you have to get into the habit of training, obviously, and noticing things. One thing that I always say is that slow down, slow your speech down so you can start actually giving mental space to your speech. A lot of people do not know how to monitor themselves when they speak. But if you start changing one parameter of your speech patterns or your speech production, then you can actually start seeing things and noticing things. But to make a long story short, you have to you have to start from the very beginning. You have to be extremely interested. You have to learn how to train your ear. There's a lot of courses out there that you can take. For example, if you've just started learning a language in whatever language, maybe not in the most exotic ones, but for sure in English, French, Spanish, Russian, you will find courses that help you with that. So they're, give you a lot of tips and tricks about how to, position your mouth, muscles, the correct position of your body also counts because it's not just the mouth, but it's also all the rest of the body. We produce language with the entire part, this part, the trunk, so to speak. So sorry if this is rather brief, but it would take me 3 hours. We have entire courses on pronunciation. I've given entire courses privately about how to do that. But I hope this piece of advice helps. Anna, come distinguere nome scolare due lingue molto simili, nel mio caso tedesco-olandese? How not to mix up two languages that are very similar, in my case, German and Dutch. It really depends on the level you have in these two languages. So one is surely more prominent, so to speak, than the other. And one way not to confuse them is to make sure that you practice them every single day on a daily basis, because that way you're not confusing your brain. One thing that often happens is that a person say, imagine now, Anna, that you have been learning German for quite some time, you speak it well, but then you move to Holland and you start speaking Dutch, and then you get friends and you speak Dutch all the time. Then after a year of just speaking Dutch, if you try to speak German, what happens is that every time you speak German, Dutch comes out of your mouth, comes into mind. And this is because it's called a survival of the busiest, or something along those lines. Means that your brain, you have to use stuff for your brain not to become rusty. And this, unfortunately, is how it works. Speaking skills degrade very quickly if you don't use your languages. So one thing that I found to be true in my case is when a language starts getting in the background or the back burner, I design ways to start doing something with it somehow. The best would be to speak both languages at the same time, but then it really depends on the situation. It depends on a number of factors. Now, I don't know you. I don't know. There's a lot of factors that make a difference when it comes to mixing the two languages. But it depends on the story. Which one did you learn first? Which one are you using more now? So it really depends on the situation, on your personal circumstances. But I would say that for the lack of brevity and simplicity, you should try to speak them more or less every day, both of them and get enough exposure to both of them, so you're telling your brain both are important. Because if there's not a balance, there's an imbalance between the two, then it's normal. Then one gets more in the way than the other, and you have a harder time speaking one more than the other. So chat, Berta says, use only English so that everyone can understand what you're saying. I'm reading the questions directly in the languages, but Berta is right. It would be better if you write in English. I know that we can speak a bunch of languages, but I would like to, we're talking about language learning and learning how to learn a language. We will make, possibly, if you're interested, more live videos about in Spanish, for example, or just in Italian, just to start with, and then in other languages, but just to keep it more like compact and simple. Karim, greetings from Iraqi Kurdistan. Greetings from Rome, Italy. Have you ever tired teaching a language? That's a very interesting question. Have you ever gotten tired, I guess you were wanting to say, teaching a language? No, because I love it. I love coaching. I don't exactly teach a language, but I love coaching. Sometimes I get tired if I have 7 classes in a row. For example, Friday is my students' day. So I get tired, physically tired, but I'm not tired of, coaching. I'm more physically tired because it takes a lot of energy to plan a lesson, build a lesson, prepare a lesson, give a lesson, and follow suit. So greetings from Romania. Fantastic. I have to go visit sooner or later. So где учил русский? Where did you learn Russian? At home. Let me see here if I can find it. Yes, so I started with this in 2014. Maybe you can see it. I hope you can. The camera has to adjust. Logitech. And I think a more relevant question is not где, it's not where, it's more like how you learned Russian. So I started with Asimil, and then I made a YouTube video in 2008. So I started learning a language Russian in 2004. If I am correct, I didn't write it here. I thought I had. So I started learning in 2004, and then for a year it went really well. Then fell out of touch with the language, and then I started learning again. Gave me a lot. YouTube, making that YouTube video in Russian at the beginning, gave me a lot of enthusiasm and motivation. So I started learning again, and then I met my ex-Russian girlfriend in Moscow when I went to a conference. I got to know her there, and then I started using basically Russian more and more on a weekly basis. On a daily basis, actually. I went to Russia and multiple times, and that really helped me improve my Russian. John, I guess, GNL. Hi, Luca. Can you fix an accent after 20 years of bad speaking habits? It's quite tough. You have to imagine like having a knot. So I always use the metaphor of the knot. The knot is extremely tight. If you want to untie it, it's going to be very, very tough. I always see the bright side and the silver linings of things. But after 20 years of speaking a language poorly with the poor accent, it's going to be tough to fix the accent or reduce the accent, whatever you want to call it. And then you should I think you should aim at maybe slowing down, trying to be as clear as possible, but fixing your habits when it comes to pronunciation after 20 years, that's going to be tough. So Otterface, I like the name, Otterface. Hey, Luca, when it comes to practicing, I always worry about whether I'm doing it the right way or not, wasting time. I've seen a lot of, if you practice it this way, you're wasting your time vids. I think that practice is always good in and of itself. The only thing I would say is that if you're practicing a language, what you should do is always talk about stuff you like. Make sure that you get some feedback if you're talking to someone, and get feedback. Record the conversation and listen to it again. And out of your comfort zone, try to say things you cannot say, and do not worry about performing. Worry about actually learning. These are the 5 things that you should abide by when it comes to practicing a language, and the rest doesn't matter. Don't listen to people telling you do it this way, do it the other way. Just do it the way you want to do it. As at the end of the conversation, you feel satisfied, you got out of your comfort zone, you talked about something you liked, and you got feedback, and you're going to review it, then you're going to be fine. So let me go down here. Will there be a time when you will? Yes, but I don't know this. I don't see the rest of the question. Hi, Luca. Regards from Venezuela. Have you studied Latin? I have, and I have. Latin was my favorite subject at school. After 5 years of high school, I was called the monster of the Quinto A. This is the legend has it, right? They said that I was famous at school for Latin because I remember my Latin teacher. They gave us like these versione, we call it in Italian. I used to do 4 or 5 in an hour, and then I got bored and I kept doing them. Once I did 8 of them in an hour. But not because I think I was good because I was learning by myself. Again, going back to what I was saying before, they gave us very easy texts to translate. So I was learning Latin on my own because I loved it, and so I was way more skilled than anybody else. And yeah, Latin was one of my favorite subjects at school. If you're ever learning Latin, I highly recommend you get this book. This book is amazing. It's called Familia Romana Pars, so part 1. And you can see why from the very beginning, without knowing anything of the language, they just make it comprehensible. So it's a text that you can read, and by reading it and looking at the images, you will literally, just to give you an idea of how this works, I don't know if you can see it. I hope you can. So they have at the border of the page, this is how you should learn a language. They have conceived this text so that you can learn by following a Roman family, the story of a Roman family. And then you have descriptions, you have a number of amazing things that they let me see if you see the details. So they show for example, actions, etc., etc. It's just amazing. And I wrote a very interesting piece on my blog about how to learn Latin or ancient Greek as if it were a modern language. Maybe Kevin can put a link in there. So, Karim, do you think learning 500 most frequent words can help you learn a language? Sure, but it's not just words that make a difference. You can learn 500 words. The most important thing, though, is to start creating sentences that are useful for you to have meaningful conversations. So if you're just learning 500 most frequent words, it doesn't serve that much of a purpose. But if you learn how to use them and combine them, you will learn. I have a video. My team and we have a video in store about learning a language, in learning to speak at a very basic level in record time. If you're interested, we're going to show you how to do that. It's a pretty exciting project. But again, here the main thing is how to use those words. It's not the words. It's not the pieces of information that you collect. It's the way you use them. How I'm not sure I can pronounce this. Gshit NK. How important is listening in language learning? Very important. The more you listen, the better, I would say. So get into the habit of listening as much as you can, but make sure that what you listen to is at least comprehensible to a certain degree, 60%. And one piece of advice for people who have been learning a language for 1 month is to, for example, let's say that you've been learning a language with Asimil for 1 month. So just make sure that you listen massively to the language, to all the material that you've already covered. So once you've understood you've gone through the first 30 lessons, then when you move on to the next lessons, then keep listening to the ones you've already done, because it's great comprehensible input and it helps you retain vocabulary because you review it in a way. So Agustín, hola Lucas, estudio portugués y me cuesta mucho mantenerme estudiando. ¿Cómo desarrollo disciplina? Augustine says, how do I develop discipline? Well, discipline is something that you create by doing it. So the first thing I would say is plan things beforehand. Start small, these 2 things. So every Sunday, tomorrow, just spend 10 minutes sitting down and thinking, what can I start learning Portuguese? Where is it that I feel fresh? If you don't plan and and you learn on the spur of the moment, so to speak, and you depend on your willpower, it's not going to happen. It can happen for 3 days. It's not going to happen for a long time. So make sure that you plan beforehand and you start small, and then you can increase the amount of time that you spend on language, on your Portuguese every single day. But 10 minutes a day is better than, 10 minutes every day in a week, is better than 1 hour just on Saturdays or Sundays. Jurado, what are the languages that make you feel comfortable the most? Uh, I would say English, French, Spanish. I feel great when I speak these languages. Italian, not so much, but this is a little bit complex to explain. But from a psychological point of view, I remember that I was in Bergamo because the French teacher of the school of this liceo linguistico, she had invited me to hold a speech at a theater for her students, and I gave the speech while I was rehearsing both in English and in Italian, and she was struck by the fact that in English I felt much more, much more confident. And that's true. When I speak English, I feel like there's a part of me, this Luca here, I'm standing and I'm seeing myself speak. And it's an amazing feeling. It's just because in English not being my native language, I don't have all the social pressure, all the things that have, I've created an identity in Italian. So by speaking, this is my native language, and I don't have these things in English. English is a language I acquired later. So it's really difficult to explain in words what I feel, but when I speak English, I feel free. I don't know if that ever happened to you guys, but when you speak a foreign language, that if you speak it well, you're liberated in a way. So le français давай русский. I'm going to the very bottom. So I see also the questions that are they're being here. So as Leah, hi Luca, would you be able to comment on using Glossik as a supplement to textbooks in Itokai? Leah, I confess I do not know Glossik. I know some students of mine who have been using it, so I cannot really comment on that because I don't know the system. Why not asks, which one is better to improve vocabulary, newspaper or book? I think in language learning, you should avoid asking questions like, is this better than that? I would always say both. You can use the newspaper and the book. You can read a newspaper and the book. They serve different purposes. They have different language, they have a different kind of language, but I would say both. I love reading newspaper pretty much every day. I have a pile of newspapers in my bathroom and magazines, and I also read books. So you get the best of both worlds. If you don't like the news because you get stressed by them, then you just focus on books. Cute pats. Do people recognize you on the streets? Yes, more and more everywhere I go. That's just amazing because it's just mind-blowing, just like they want autographs or they want pictures. And it fills me with joy because it means that people follow me if they recognize me. More than me, what is important is the message that I try to convey. It's the beauty about, the beauty of language learning, of speaking languages, changing your life. And yeah, it happened a lot. And I had a lot of interesting experiences, of people I met on the street who recognized me on the street. So, what has been the most immersive trip that you have taken? This is an interesting question. I would say I always call, it depends on what you mean by trip. For me, life is a trip. But if I would say that the most intensive, immersive trip, I would say, or experience is in France, because I had, when I was with my French girlfriend for 5 years, I basically lived like a French when I was in Paris. I lived with her parents for a couple of months, and I was visiting her parents a lot, and they really liked French culture, talking about culture, movies they were showing. It was just amazing. So it was the most immersive experience. I was going to an interpreting school in Paris, so I was really surrounded by the language. And as I always say, it doesn't depend on where you live, depends on how you live. But if you have the where and how both in place, then it's amazing. So I had a French girlfriend I was just speaking French with. Her French family was really, they were very educated people who loved talking about literature, poetry, politics, and movies, etc. And on top of that, I was going to an interpreting school where they requested a very high level in French and cultural understanding and a grasp of the culture itself. So I would say that was the most immersive trip. If by trip you mean experience, then I want to go this summer. I'm seriously contemplating the idea of going to Greece for 2 weeks to Syros. I don't know if there's any Greek there, but I heard that it's a beautiful country. And for the very first time after some 25 years, I'm going to go back to school again. It's going to be exciting. Luca, your team, you have to do. They also speak multiple languages, or at least more than one. Yes, the stuff. The thing I really like about my team, Kevin, Berta, Andrei, Sofia, is that we all love language learning. We all have a mission. This is not just a venture. This is not something we do for money. This is something we do out of sheer passion. So they all learn a bunch of languages. Kevin, I think, Kevin, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I think you speak like six or four or five or six. They've all been, apart from Andre, I think, students of mine. So we all share a love for languages. Sofia speaks also a bunch of languages. Berta speaks, her native Spanish, English, Italian, and French. So yeah, we all we all love language learning, and we all have a mission. That's why I love them so much, apart from the fact that they're wonderful individuals. So, Nain Natalia. So it's fantastic, Jose says. Yes, it's perfect. I can't wait to go to Greece if Mr. Corona allows me to travel. Dabo, do you meditate in different languages in your mind? Are there different techniques that help you level up? I don't meditate in the languages. It's just meditation for me is just letting actually thoughts go by, and I don't think in words when I meditate. So I don't know if you mean that, but when I meditate, I just focus on taking a stand and looking at myself from a different perspective, from an external perspective, and observe myself from the outside. Antonio, where do you actually live? I live in Rome, but I will be traveling. I hope I will go to Munich in a few weeks. And then from Germany, I will go to Poland for a couple of months. And then I should be either in Berlin, should be around Europe. I also go to Budapest and Slovakia. So going to be in Mitteleuropa, as they call it. Are you still doing Japanese? No, I'm not, Marley. I'm not doing Japanese for now. I'm working on 3 languages at the same time. I'm going to make a video about that, Hungarian, Greek, and Danish. And but I'll go back to Japanese. Fin Goupil, I don't know if I pronounce it right. Maybe you're French. I don't know. I also feel different in other languages. Could you say more about how your personality sort of changes in other languages? I don't think that my personality changes. I always use the metaphor of the prism. A prism, when it's hit by the light. A prism, you see it and then you see the light that is white. But when the light hits the prism, then you see the different colors that make up the light, that white ray of light that hits the prism. And I believe the language learning makes you discover different sides of your personality. So the personality is also always the same, but you touch different colors of your personality, so to speak. So when I speak English, it's the part that part of me is that Luca, as if Luca were born in the United States in a way. And the same happens when I speak other languages like French or Spanish, languages in which I have really, I integrated the culture in me. And it's just like a lens. That's why I always say this. Speaking 4 languages makes you see you have more colors. It makes you see a more colorful world. But my personality in and of itself does not change. It's my vision of life. It's the amount of colors through which I see the world that changes. So you apparently feel different. Maybe you're not different. It's just that you're discovering a little bit more of yourself every single day. How do you travel relate to your work? When I got invited to a TED Talk. I couldn't go, TEDx actually, in France because of the pandemic, and that was a bummer because I wanted to talk about the beauty of learning languages. But when I get invited to have workshops or conferences, I travel there. But I normally travel and work. The only thing that suffers maybe is that YouTube videos, they're more difficult to do because I have all my gear here and I have to buy some gear that I can carry around. But fundamentally, I can travel from everywhere. Just a second, I've been speaking nonstop for 1 hour and I have to drink a little bit. So, hombre, qué alegría verte, Luca. Qué alegría, Iván. Me acabo de incorporar, creo que llego tarde. No pasa nada. As he says, it's nice to see you. Okay, now the chat here. ¿Qué nivel de mandarín tienes? Again, I answer the same the question above. I do not know. I haven't spoken so much as spoken Mandarin in a long time. I made a video in other languages, in 11 languages recently, but Mandarin, Chinese, and Japanese are languages that are a little bit, they're in the back burner. They're suffering a little bit because I use, let's say, between 6 and 9 languages every week, but Portuguese, Swedish, Mandarin, Chinese, and Japanese are languages I speak less. So when I learned it when I started learning it back in 20, it was almost 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I learned it to a decent level. And I remember I had a lot of fun using a website. I don't even remember the name of it, where you can meet people and talk to them in chats, and then, in a voice chat. I think I got into a B1, B2 level, but then I neglected it a little bit. And so I do not know exactly, but the good thing that did not happen with, this thing did not happen with Chinese. It did happen, unfortunately, with Japanese, is that I know for a fact that if I go back to Chinese, I'm going to go back to it pretty quickly. So I'm not really particularly worried about that. And I know that Chinese is a very important language. Plus, I discovered some amazing, amazing channels on YouTube that I can't wait to see. One is, in particular, is called Mandarin Corner. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Mandarin Corner. Also, Yo-Yo Chinese is great, but Mandarin Corner is just fantastic. So it has like interviews on the streets, subtitles in English and in Chinese. It's just mind blowing. So it's just amazing. How long would you spend on Asimil when beginning a language? It depends. I normally spend like 4 or 5 months, but if you use it, when I always tell my students, if they apply the bidirectional translation technique, it's normally 3 months, but you can also finish it in 2 months. It depends on, I'm never in a hurry when it comes to language learning. So I take my time, but you can finish the book in 3 months. If you have 100 lessons and you go through one a day, and then you keep reviewing the preceding ones, 3-4 months are enough. Have you ever gotten, Diana Salinas asks, have you ever gotten confused between languages? Oh, now I lost the question because the chat, so I can't find your question anymore, but the answer is sometimes yes. Oh, I found it again. Sometimes I get confused when it comes to speaking some languages that are similar. Maybe I've been using German a lot, and then I have to use Dutch for the reasons I was just talking about before. And it depends. I can get confused if I have, it happens. I have a bunch of friends from all over the world at home and over dinner, and then I found myself speaking one language here, one language there, the other language there, and then it can get confusing if everybody speaks to me in a different language. But in general, I don't. If I speak one language and I've been speaking that language for quite some time with one person, I don't get confused. It really depends on a number of circumstances. Is reading more effective than listening if you only have time for one activity? Learning 2 languages at the same time and consider reading in one and listening to the other? Interesting question. I think they're both effective. I think ultimately it depends on your level. It depends on your goal. It depends on a number of factors. If you're a beginner, you should read and listen at the same time. If you just read and you don't listen, you don't get to hear how the language is spoken. You won't understand. Your listening comprehension will be bad. But if you just listen and read very little, then you will be, I wouldn't go so far as to say illiterate, but it will be a little bit more difficult. I would say if you have 20 minutes of your time a day, just do 10 minutes of listening or 10 minutes of reading, or read and listen at the same time. You get the best of both worlds. So I don't feel those emotions as powerful as in English. Non è una domanda sulle lingue, ma come fai a bere la ferrarelle? She doesn't know how I can drink ferrarelle. I don't know. I don't know why. Well, to each his own, as they say. So what's the best way to improve listening comprehension? Is to listen to a lot and listening to comprehensible input. So always make sure that whatever your level, if you still do not understand very well a language very well, make sure that you always either watch a video with subtitles or you listen with a transcript when you're listening to a podcast. And when you reach a decent level, make sure that you listen at least 30 minutes a day, because listening is very important. As I said before, plan your listening, and then just make it happen on a regular basis. What I do is, for example, I build a habit of just listening to Polish every single time I take a shower. I have my I don't know where they are right now, my AirPods. So if I don't have to wash my hair, I just listened. So I finished training, workout or running, and then I always, uh, my brain automatically tells me it's Polish time. So in those 20 minutes, I always listen to Polish. And building habits is much better than relying on willpower. So plan beforehand, build habits, and make listening a priority, whatever your level, because it does make a difference if you do it every day. How would you gauge your Arabic currently? I don't speak Arabic, Michel. So I just rate it as 0, beginner. I think I don't speak a word of Arabic now that I think about it. Maybe I can say a couple, but very very few. Giovanni Scagliusi, ciao Luca, che ne pensi del metodo AJAT, all Japanese all the time? What do you think of this method? I do not know the method in detail. I have recently talked to another polyglot who talks about the method, AJAT, all Japanese all the time. I would just say I know about the concept of massive immersion. If you want to immerse yourself massively, there's no harm in doing that. It's great for some, it's not great for others, because some people have the will of immersing themselves and just dedicate themselves to that language, and but if you have other fish to fry, if you're very busy, if you have a family, if you have other languages to tackle, then it might be more difficult to do it in practice. But the idea in and of itself is great. The more time you spend with a language, and you have your phone in the language, you watch movies in the language, you do stuff in the language, the better. Shang, how long does it take you to learn Russian? So in general, if you say how long does it take in general to learn Russian, that's a question. How long it took me? And is it hard to learn? Yes, it's a hard language to learn if you don't speak any Slavic language. So it depends on your native language, as always. If your native language is Ukrainian or Slovak or Polish, for that matter, it's much easier. If you don't speak any of these languages, then it gets a little bit complicated. Sorry for the dogs barking. It always starts at the same time, both of them. And how long it took me, I really don't know. I started in 2014, but I didn't practice the language at all after a year. And then, as I said before, I met my ex-girlfriend, and it changed everything. So when in 2013 I started, dating my ex-girlfriend, and I started using the language all the time. So I'm really not sure. It's really. It can be misguiding to say I started at this time, because I count more. You should count the amount of hours you spend with the language more than when you started. I would say I'm not sure, but after I met my ex-girlfriend, I was really motivated, and I started learning on it. Not only speaking with her, but also doing a bunch of stuff, and it went very quickly. But I would say normally, if your Russian is not, if you don't speak any Slavic language, it might take you a couple of years to start speaking it decently, because Russian is a tough nut to crack, as they say. So what do you think of Duolingo, Pimsleur? I don't use Duolingo or Pimsleur, so I confess that I do not know. But if you want to use Duolingo and or Pimsleur, you can. Maybe it would be the cherry on top. I think you say cherry on top if I'm not wrong. But I would not use them as your main resources, to tell you the truth. But again, I don't know, because I've never used them. But I hear that they're more like to get entertained, more rather than learning. They're very popular, but I'm not sure whether they're really great tools to learn a language or keep improving. Jason, do you have any advice to get motivated to study a language again after one lost your fluency? Yes, to get motivated, I think you have to. One thing that I would do is to sit down and visualize yourself in the future, 1 year from now. Think about what you can do with that language. Think with your emotions. Don't think with your prefrontal cortex, as I call it here. Think with your limbic system, because a lot of people don't. Emotions are not in the discourse. They're not addressed when it comes to language learning, but they're very important. To get motivated, you need emotions. You don't need instructions. Remember that. You need emotions. You don't need instructions. So to get emotions involved, you need to visualize yourself in the future, get connected with a person, find a person to talk to online. If you don't know, if you've lost contact with locals, you have to do something that really sparks the interest again. And that has to do with emotions, whatever it is. be it watching a movie, reading a book, going to the country, speaking with a person, visualizing yourself in the future. But if you have to get the ball rolling when it comes to, again, the emotional side of learning, because it's really important. And at the end of the day, that's what makes us tick. What binds us, what compels me for that matter, is being able to embrace new worlds, talk to new people, savor new different kinds of foods, see places. This is what makes me tick. This is the reason why I learn languages. In and of itself, the language is exciting, but words do not excite me. Grammar explanations do not excite me. What excites me is the possibility of, again, living new experiences through another lens and through different colors. That's what excites me, and I think that's what should excite you as well. So, what language do you think in? Interesting. I think when I get mad, I think in Italian, but I also think in English, and I find myself speaking English more than I wake up in the morning and I speak English to myself, not Italian. And I see languages in a way. English is more like for work. I plan in English, so when I have to plan stuff and be more rational, so to speak, I use English. For other languages, I use, for other things, I use different languages. But in general, mainly Italian, English, and sometimes Spanish, which are actually the languages I'm using the most. So maybe it makes sense. But I've dreamed in all languages I know. So, Frisch, should someone who's learned thousands of words through reading but never spoke go back to beginner material to practice? That's an interesting question. So let me read it again. Should someone who's learned thousands of words through reading but never spoke go back to beginner material? No, I think you should just practice speaking. So just collect your words if you want to, but get to practice. You can read as much as you want, but if your goal is to, apart from reading, is to practicing a language, speaking a language, then you have to start speaking a language. And in that regard, going back to what I said before, maybe you can find someone to talk to in a protected environment and start speaking, because reading is great, but speaking is even better. Or actually, no, they're both great. So what book can you recommend for learning Japanese? I would say one of the best investments, now it's difficult to grab it for whatever reason, is this. This is a great book for any language you want to learn. It's called Japanese Sentence Patterns for Effective Communication, because what I really like about this book is that it focuses on communication. It focuses on actually using the words as pieces of Lego to convey meaningful messages, rather than learning a bunch of words and sentences. So you can get all the books you want, but this one is going to really help you when it comes to communicating in Japanese. And there's 15 other books I have there, but we're running out of time, so maybe next time we can talk about that. Or again, guys, you can always go to my blog and leave questions there. You can send me questions. I receive a lot of questions. I don't address all of them every day because there's a lot of them, but probably we'll create a session where you can ask your questions and we'll collect all of them. So let me see. Was Babbel very useful for you? I made a couple of videos with Babbel. I never used it, so I'm not a Babbel guy. Because I've never used it. I just worked with them making videos. They're fantastic guys. I really like. When I was in Berlin, I worked with them, but I do not use their app. I heard that it's a good app to use, but I do not know it. So I don't know. ¿Cuál es tu método para aprender idiomas? What's your method to learn languages? It would take me 4 hours to explain that. So, unfortunately, I can't really address this question now. Again, guys, I'm gonna keep answering questions for the next 20 minutes. So it's gonna be 1 hour 45 minutes. But we can save the chat. So we're collecting all the questions you're asking, and we hope we can answer all of them in somehow. Some questions are recurring questions. So if you watch also the Q&A live, the first one, you will see that you can find more information. Maybe if I haven't answered your question, you can find more information in the other one, in the other Q&A. How do you maintain your languages? I think I replied to this question before. I create a lifestyle. Juan asks, I'm losing a lot of words when I'm listening. How do you solve this? I'm not sure what you mean by losing a lot of words, but I guess that if you mean miss a lot of words in the sense that you don't understand them, well, you can go back to the drawing board, as so to speak, and you can start listening and reading at the same time until your listening comprehension gets really good, and then you can go back to just listening to a language. If you miss a lot of words, it means that your listening comprehension is not good, or you're choosing material that is not particularly, it's not proper, or it's not great for your current level. Shahidur, is it possible to learn a language for free on the internet? Yes, you can learn a language for free on the internet if you can, but if you want to invest some time in figuring out the know-how or find tutors who can help you, that speeds up the process. But the answer is yes, you can, but it might take a little bit longer than usual. But the answer is yes, you can nowadays just use the internet. You're paying for your internet connection, but apart from that, you can do amazing things nowadays. So Elisabetka asks a question that has been asked a lot of times, and it's really interesting. Will learning of languages disappear due to translating technologies? I've heard from one polyglot it may be a matter of 15 years. What do you think? I don't think that language learning will ever disappear. It's the same thing as asking, for example, oh, do you remember when they were saying that paper books were doomed because you had the Kindle? The rising of the Kindle never happened because people still use, and a lot of people prefer paper books. So directly speaking a foreign language with a human being is an act of love. Language learning speaking languages builds bridges among cultures, and as much as you can find a wonderful electronic voice in between the two of you, two people speaking, but it will never replace the beauty of human communication through direct human communication through a language you know. And as I said, language learning, speaking a foreign language, builds worlds, connects people. And so technologies will, for sure, will be very useful to connect more and more people that can't speak they don't speak a common language, but I don't think that they're going to disappear. Not in 15 years, not in 30 years, not in 100 years. So Abe, can I continue learning vocab simply from reading and listening, or do you think it's worth trying some kind of flashcard vocab method? I think that the more you listen and the more you read, the better, or the more you listen and read at the same time. But if you can find also a way to deliberately kind of review somehow the words or fragments that you keep learning, so much the better. I do both. I expose myself massively to a language, but I don't demand that merely by listening and reading I will absorb the language. Because I don't think that that's the way it works. Stephen Krashen talks about it, like incomprehensible input, and I agree with that, but I also have my own opinion, and I've recently read a very interesting speech by a Japanese linguist that talks about the fact that linguists recently tend to lean towards an hypothesis in which deliberate practice facilitates the acquisition of a language. So to answer your question is do both. Get exposed passively, but also make sure that you design a system where you review words because your brain is going to thank you for it. Let's go to the very bottom of the chat. So the last 15 minutes, I've been running a marathon here. Where are the best places to watch, read about language learning research? Well, the internet. I know that this is a little bit vague, but if you do some research, you will find a lot of interesting books. It's just maybe you should avoid stuff that is a little bit too academic, but I've found a lot of stuff. We will probably put it in the resources section on my blog, where if you're interested in linguistics, I've read a bunch of books, and I have them all there. Linguistics, but it depends on your goal again. Let me go up here. Hey, Luca, do you speak or plan to speak Catalan at some point? I'm curious because I'm a Catalan native speaker. I always joke with Berta, she's a member of my team. She's from Madrid. And I try to speak fake Catalan, but the reality is I'm interested in the language. I like it. And I wish I had started learning it when I was in Barcelona for 5 months. I attended all lectures in Catalan, so I understand it decently, but I've never really learned it. I would like to learn it one day. I don't think it's going to take me a long time to learn it because I already speak Italian. I'm a native Italian speaker. I speak French, speak Spanish, so it's Catalan is a combination of these languages in a way. So I've been toying with the idea of learning Catalan. One day I might give it a shot, or I might, if one day I move to Barcelona, which is one of my favorite cities in Europe, I definitely might give it a shot. Bonsoir, Luca. Do you plan to take tests to evaluate your level in certain languages? Yes, I've taken 4 tests, B2, C2, and now I would like to pass the C1 in Polish, maybe in Warsaw at the end of the year, and I will document it if I can when I go to Poland. So, esistono risorse per persone ipovedenti? Are there any Polyglot resources for the visually impaired? I confess, JD, that I do not know. I don't know about this, so I can't really reply to this question. I wish I knew, but I don't. Dialma, hey Lucas, what is the best book to learn German? There is no best book. There's just a book that is the best for you. There are no best resources, for any language. It depends. If you're a beginner, I have used my own resource, which is called De Agostini per Te. That was back in 1996. I think Asimil is a great resource, but once again, I think you have to invest some time in doing some research and find the resource that works best for you. Do you still study English systematically? I think I've answered this question before. Is it possible to become fluent in 7 days? Well, if by fluent you mean saying a couple of sentences, then yes. But if by fluent you mean to be able to communicate in a language in a meaningful way, then the answer is no. If you'll see all these stunts on the internet of learning a language in 7 days, the problem with these titles is that fluent is a very vague word that means nothing and everything at once. So it generates a lot of discussions and a lot of, I wouldn't go so far as to say is hatred, but no. To me, learning to speak and to use a language in a meaningful way takes years, no matter which language. Some languages are easier. It takes less to learn because they're closer to yours. Catalan, for example. I think it would take me 3 months to start speaking decently in Catalan. I wouldn't say fluent. But 7 days, forget about it. Let me see here. Luca, ¿cómo aprender un idioma desde cero por tu cuenta? How to learn a language from scratch? This is a good question. Okay, someone else asked me, but that's quite complex. You can actually go to my blog, and there's quite a few actually articles. Maybe Kevin, you can. If you search how to learn a language from scratch, Luca Lamparello on Google, you will find some articles that talk about that. There's a lot of interesting pieces of advice, hopefully, and you can also listen. Remember, on my blog, you can listen to all the articles. You can read and listen, especially the last 100, I think, articles. I've been reading the article out loud, so you can listen and read, so you can practice. Ruslan says Russian is not that difficult. Well, if you're Russian, yes, that's not that complicated. When you come to Poland, will there be a possibility to meet you, Kaya? I mean, I said it on Facebook and on Instagram that when I went to Krakow, I will be in Krakow, Łódź, Warszawa, and if you want to meet, I've met a lot of people there, and I think because of the pandemic, we cannot do a meetup. But if you wanna meet, just send me a message on Instagram or on Facebook, and then we can make it happen. I love meeting people, so whoever wants to meet when I'm in Poland or in Munich, let me know, and if I have the time, I'd be delighted to see you guys. How do you learn cases, Eliseo? Eliseo, we have a couple of articles on my blog, very detailed about how to learn cases. Kevin can post a link, so you should definitely check that out. If you write Luca Lamparello how to learn cases, you will see that. There's a lot of information, and I've made a YouTube video about that. José Luis, eres ingeniero eléctrico. Soy ingeniero electrónico. I'm an electronic engineer. I'm specialized in particle accelerators. I can see you my thesis. So this is in English, actually. It's accelerazione per protoni generati da plasma. So accelerated protons, plasma interaction. So it's particle accelerators. I wrote this thesis in English. This is the second thesis I have. I have second degree. I have anyway. So I'll put it here. Yeah, my I love mathematics, quantum mechanics, physics, and particle accelerators, but I don't talk about the stuff on the internet. Because this this channel is mainly about language learning, but yeah, I have a bunch of other interests apart from that. And if you guys like, if you like me to talk about productivity, growth, personal growth, etc., even mathematics and how to do that, I can do that. So, a very interesting question in French here. Bonsoir Lucas, d'abord merci pour ton contenu. Est-ce que ça t'arrive pendant l'apprentissage de surassocier certains aspects d'une langue avec une autre? He's asking me if I'm associating different aspects of a language. It happens. It happens sometimes. I leverage I leverage the knowledge I have in certain languages to learn others. But I do not, unless it's strictly necessary, I do not use a language. I think the term is triangulate. So I don't think that it's exciting to learn Russian through French. I just use Italian. Pedro asked the question, how long it took you to learn Russian? Maybe you read it before. So wow, your knowledge is really impressive. Fingon, thanks a bunch. I love learning. So this is something that came from my family. My grandmother took me like some 20 years ago. She asked me, hey, do you want to learn some Latin, French? I remember it was a summer school. It's an episode I recall very fondly. And she instilled the power, the beauty of learning. So I've been learning. I've been a learner for as long as I remember. And I love learning everything every single day. I wake up at 5 and I sometimes 5:30, sometimes 6. Today I woke up at 8. I was very tired, but I love learning all day long. Coach Luca, hai mai pensato di insegnare a scuola? Have you ever thought of learning at school? I'm building my own language academy, guys. You should sign up. So I've never thought of teaching because I've been, I have a degree in engineering, and then immediately I started learning as working as a coach. But yes, I will build a language learning academy, and you guys, as I said, you sign up. It's gonna be cool. Physica quantica, do you use quantum mechanics? Ivan says, to learn languages. Not exactly. Lofoten, how old are you? I'm 40. I just turned 40 on the 17th of December 2020. So at the ripe age of 40, I have some. You can see some white hair here, so I'm getting old. How many hours do you sleep? Around 8 hours. I made it. The most important thing now is sleeping. Is sleep for me. So sleep, nutrition, and motion are the most important things. Then concentration. This is the fourth thing, and then language learning in this order. What do you think about Esperanto? I don't know. I don't know the language. I've never felt compelled to learn it, but it's a very good idea. It's a very interesting idea. The founder, that was like 100 years ago or a little bit more. And I think it's great to get started in a foreign language because I heard that it's a rather simple language that is not just been conceived to facilitate, communication among different peoples, but also, in general, it's a language learning tool that you can use to understand the mechanics and dynamics of language learning. Eliseo, parli romanesco, altra lingua regionale? Do you speak romanesco? Romanesco doesn't exist anymore. I speak Roma. It's not a dialect, but yes, with my friends, we speak a weird language that other Italians don't understand. That's my natural language, actually. Roman Italian, I would say. Then Italian is the second language I speak. How many hours do you speak? Okay, wait. So I'm scrolling up. Michael, do you think Asimo is one of the best things one can do to start learning a language? It's not one of the best things you can do. It's one of the best resources you can use depending on the language. Yes, I would say it's a great resource if you want to learn a bunch of languages. I wouldn't recommend it for Asian languages because it's less good. But yes, if you want to learn Romanian, French, German, Spanish, and whatnot, I think it's a great resource. We still have 5 minutes, guys. So how do you write? How do you practice your writing skills? This is another very good one. I keep a journal every day. I wake up every single day and I write a journal, but I do it in Italian. And for other languages, I have different techniques. I haven't talked about writing on my blog. True. So we will write. This is a very good idea. I'll write about writing. Meta skill. And by the way, I have recently. I wanted to show you guys just a second because it's not here. It's here. If you have some time to and energy to invest on a meta skill, I would definitely get this book. I don't know if you can see it. It's How to Take Smart Notes by Sönke Arens. Fantastic book about, if you want to, one simple technique to boost writing, learning, and thinking for students, academics, and nonfiction book writers. Highly recommend it because it teaches you the beautiful art of writing in any language. So, funny mistranslation story. There's quite a few actually. I'll tell you more about it maybe in the last live Q&A. Very interesting, funny episodes in my life about misinterpreting and mistranslations. If you had all the money in the world, what would you buy and why? I wouldn't buy necessarily anything. I don't think the money, first of all, I don't think the money makes a difference, but it makes for a better life. I wouldn't buy anything physical. I would buy myself an experience. I would go to New Zealand. That's what I would do. I would spend the money that I have to spend to go to New Zealand and spend 3 months there in the mountains, and then to spend time at the beach and explore New Zealand in general. This is what I would do. I like spending money for experiences, not so much books, sure, but again, I spend money on books to have the experience of reading a book, not to have the book in and of itself. I've learned that being is much more important than just having. So if I had all the money in the world, I would spend most of my time traveling and exploring the world, because life is short and the world is bigger than one thinks, and it's difficult to explore it all in one lifetime. What would be the best way to teach Germans the sense of humor? I don't know about that. I think I had a lot of fantastic German friends. I don't think that Germans do not have sense of humor. They just have a different sense of humor. But thanks for the question. FIFA Macedo, that was a fantastic live. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys. I wanted to say, okay, we have still 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you for all the enthusiasm, all the questions. I want to leave you by telling you that I think we will do more of these Q&A live sessions in the future. We might do another one maybe in a month, always in English, and then we might start venturing into other languages. Maybe, I received a lot of requests for making this kind of live Q&A in Spanish. So maybe we could do a Spanish one, both for native Spanish speakers who want to learn more about language learning, because I talk about all the time, I speak English, and a lot of requests are, hey, Luca, why don't you make a video in Italian and make a video in Spanish? And as much as I would like to do that, I also want to keep the content of this YouTube channel consistent, and it's about language learning or learning how to learn. And with English, I can serve a wider audience, but this doesn't mean that I'm not going to go and do more videos and also more live videos in other languages. I would say Spanish would be next, and then Italian and then we will see if we want to make other videos in other languages. Why not? I always like having contact with you guys and speaking, and you have fantastic questions, and really this is exciting, energizing for me, because I really appreciate all the enthusiasm, the questions. It's just great. So let's recap. I hope that this was useful. This was especially, that's the most important thing, that this was first and foremost useful. I'm sorry if I skipped some of the questions. I had some of the questions here that I read some, but I skipped others. So sorry about that. But again, if we do more live videos, I will answer more and more questions, and then you can rewatch these videos whenever you want, because they're going to be on the internet very shortly, in about, I don't know, the next 20 minutes. And thank you all for the enthusiasm, for the right questions, for the nice questions, for the energy, the positive energy. Keep rocking, guys. Remember, learning a language, or 2 or 3 languages, can change your life. It's not just sitting down and learning. It's just connect and remember. connecting with different worlds. Think about it for a second. Speaking a foreign language can potentially connect you with millions of people. And that in and itself is just one of the many reasons why you should learn a foreign language. Thank you, guys. Oh, yeah, and it's never too late, you know. Thank you, guys, and I'll see you, if things go well and I go according to plan, I'll see you in a month. You know, at the last Sunday of the month, we might have another one of these Q&A. Thank you. Hugs and kisses from Rome, and keep rocking and keep learning languages. Bye-bye. Ciao.